I'm having a conversation with my good friend Jim. We're having a great chat, great conversation, and then Jim says something. And I'm like, OMG, can you even believe he said that? Much less even thought it? And you want to get up and you walk away and you're thinking, I think he needs to apologize for that. How long do you think you might be waiting sometimes for that conversation?
I hope not too long.
Yeah. But sometimes, do they even know they've even said something that triggers us? Not so much. That a lot of times we can say something that we think is just a topic of conversation, something interesting we heard, and it can often cause us to react. Now, I say that I'm talking about disagreement doesn't need to be divisive, but in that conversation with Jim, when Jim makes that comment, it's my choice as to how I show up in that conversation. It's my choice to decide whether I'm going to respond in a respectful way or if I'm going to react to what he says in maybe a less than respectful manner. And so it's thinking about how do we show up differently when people don't show up the way maybe we would want them to or hope that they might. Does any of us have conversation with people that we sometimes are shaking our head? Okay. It probably happens to most of us on a pretty regular basis. And so I like to think about ways to manage this and manage it in a more respectful manner. And I say that there's 3 words to help us do that. Well, part of me wants to just move this. I'm going to trip over something at some point. That I tend to use the 3 words space, pace, and grace. Okay? When we're having a conversation with someone and we're not sure about the direction of the conversation or what they've said, the first place we need to think about going is creating some space. How do we get in the right mindset to have a conversation? So do any of you know people, and maybe this is the wrong group because you're all optimists, maybe you never, if you're an optimist, you never have that moment where someone in your life walks through the door and you're like, ugh, and you just want to go the other direction. Do any of you have people like that in your life? Okay, I think we all do. And so imagine that you get a text or an email from them that says, hey, Kirk, I'd like to talk to you about something.
No.
Yeah, Kirk's like, no. Okay. So Kirk has already got a story in his head about how this conversation is going to go. Okay. But now imagine your best friend. And you get that email or that message that says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about what happened at that meeting. What's going to be your response to that? Great. Sure, absolutely. The message is the same. What's the difference? It's your attitude. It's your perception of the individual and the direction of how that conversation is going to go. You have told yourself a story as soon as you saw that person, or as soon as they said something that causes you to behave in a way that's different than if you were making the assumption you were having a conversation with one of your best friends. It's a choice. Are you reacting to their behavior? Are you responding in a respectful manner that's going to move the conversation forward in a productive manner versus the conversation getting shut down? Now, to get into that mindset, we have to frame something, and I often say we frame around respect. Okay? For our purposes today, we're going to define respect 3 different ways. So the first one is just to tolerate. Now, how many of you have kids? Okay. Now, not all of you, because one of you here is a child still. My guess is you may have done this. And so when my children were living at home with me, occasionally I would ask them to do something and I'd get the, whatever, Mom. Okay? They were tolerating me. Now, how do you feel when somebody tolerates you? A little put off. We're a little irritated. It can be a little annoying or frustrating.
Disappointing.
Yeah, disappointing. Okay. Now, on the other side, then, we can go to civility. And I will just refer to that because we're in Minnesota. Is Minnesota nice? Anybody in the room not from Minnesota? Didn't grow up in Minnesota? Okay. So Minnesota nice is what? Passive? Passive aggressive, okay. And just know that there's a something nice in every state. It's just a little bit different. But we often say that it's passive aggressive here. So I'll always give you directions to my house, except during the holidays. And of course, I'll always ask you how you're doing. But I might not stand there long enough to actually listen to what you've said. We're polite, but maybe don't want to get too close, too fast. Okay. And sometimes that leaves us feeling a little like, And the last one is high regard. In high regard, we often think of that as the golden rule. And the golden rule is, treat others like you'd like to be treated. I often think of high regard as the platinum rule. The platinum rule is, treat others as they want to be treated. Okay. Now, the funny thing about respect, though, is that we all have our own definition of what it looks like. And so I like to do this activity because it's actually a really easy activity to take home to share with your family members, to do with other teams that you work in, because every team should be able to define, or every family or every group should be able to define what respect looks like to them. Because that's how you set some ground rules about how you're going to react or how you're going to act with each other. So for today, we are going to define what we think of as respect as a group, okay? So if you will notice, I have 12 pieces of flip chart paper up around the room. For those of you who can and are willing and able, I'm going to ask you to get up, not quite yet, and have you write on the flip chart paper. You're going to visit 6 pieces of flip chart paper. There are 2 pieces of flip chart paper for each of these 3 definitions of respect. One of them asks you for the actions and behaviors, the eye rolling, the sign, the whatever, Mom, okay? And then I want you to brainstorm. The other one will say emotions and feelings. So how does it make you feel when you are treated that way? We are going to do this in what's called a World Cafe. So you are going to spend a minute and a half at each piece of flip chart paper. So each table is going to get up, go to a flip chart. At a minute and a half, I am going to tell you to switch. You will rotate clockwise 1 flip chart. Take your marker with you. Clearly, you're going to have to select a scribe. You can switch scribes. There should be a marker. One of my markers disappeared because there was a marker on the floor in front of every piece of flip chart paper, and I noticed.
There's one on the table behind you.
Oh, yeah, but that was for this one, and so there was one here, and I don't know where it went. So anyway, all of a sudden I just looked over and went, where'd my marker go? So it's fine, we'll figure it out. If anybody has a pen, we can use a pen. It'll all work. Somehow, it'll all work, okay? So, again, if you are willing and able, I would like you to get up at your tables, find a piece of flip chart paper. You are just brainstorming. There is no right or wrong answer, so whoever has the pen, you do not get to judge or evaluate. You just get to write down what the person has said. So with that, if you wouldn't mind, get up. Those of you who would like to stay seated, you are welcome to stay seated. This activity doesn't even take 10 minutes, so you can talk amongst yourselves, and we will come back and discuss what's on the flip chart paper. So,
Do this one first? I was going to shift weight.
I don't like to miss out on the meal.
hey,
And
I wouldn't either.
I'm always late to the party, so
No,
I miss a
no.
lot.
You're still going to get it. Okay, finish your last thought, and then if you could grab your seats, we're going to talk about this. Thank you, thank you. Hey. Okay, everyone. I think they're grabbing them because there should be a couple more over here. So, okay, everyone, we're going to go through this pretty quickly because we've got some individuals who didn't get to join, but plus you've also added some things later. What are you looking for? High regard is up on the front. High regard is in the front. Civility is right here. Thank you. Okay, so we're just going to go through this. I'm going to use my, you'd think I was an auctioneer because I'm going to take a deep breath and talk really fast. And so when people are tolerating, they're rolling their eyes, they're closed off body language, really quick responses, they're one-upping, they're inattentive, they're playing on their phone, they're unengaged, they have a whiny tone, they're unresponsive, we feel ignored, there's a blank look, there's the whatever, they're stoic, absent, they shift their weight, they're aloof, they're sign, they hold back content, a clenched jaw. And when that happens, we feel rejected, offended, annoyed, like we're wasting our time. We feel discounted, frustrated, unhappy, rejected, sad, angry, disappointed, hurt, undervalued. We want to walk away. We feel ashamed. We feel like fresh walleye. It's always something new in there that I've, not really exposed to. Grumpy, disconnected, dumb, triggered. We sense a sense of superiority by the other person. Like, wow, not a really good feeling, is it? No, not so good. When we come over to civility, civility is like, well, we're listening, but only kind of. We're somewhat reserved. We're not necessarily responding. We're considerate, but we're measured. We're acknowledging, nodding. There's more self-control. We start to hear the yes, but, and sometimes the yes, and, smiling, but not necessarily fully engaged. We're listening more deeply. For some people, it can still feel a little bit fake. We're being kind, we're attentive, empathetic, open. It's about time, promising, but then not always following through. Now, the interesting thing about civility, what I recognize, is that this civility is kind of a hot mess. Because what I find is that it's very different to people. Because if individuals are used to being tolerated, civility feels really good. But if you're used to being held in high regard, this doesn't feel so good. Okay? So it's really always interesting to do with an intact team because it can be really telling how people feel they are treated in that team or in that group. Now, when that happens, with civility, we do feel more respected, outgoing, that kind of like, whatever, WTF, okay? Or we get the meh. Okay, it's polite, we don't really feel that valued. Sometimes we feel valued, sometimes it's hopeful, we're happy, we feel somewhat focused, but then we get into high regard and it's positive, we're tolerated, we're honored, peaceful, energetic, we pass it on, we're rewarded, validated. Oh, I'm reading the emotions first, I meant to do the actions first. Smiling, listening, handshaking, there's good body language, good eye contact. We're reflecting back, we're respecting cultural differences, we're accepting people for who they are. We're nodding our heads, we're not in a hurry. We're really listening at a deep level, we're learning to mirror, we're empathetic. And when this happens, we feel positive, validated, energized, understood, and appreciated. Wow, what do you want in your life? In every conversation, which of these do you want? High regard. It's an easy answer. And then I ask the second hard question. What do you give? Yeah, so of course Mike is there, high regard. I was working with the top 100 leaders of a bank holding company and we did this and I says, well, what do you want? High regard. And I said, what do you give? Tolerate. And I'm like, you wonder why your employee engagement surveys haven't changed in 5 years. Okay? We get what we give. Now this is maybe an easy conversation for an optimist group because maybe you all live here on a regular basis. Does anybody know anybody who slips into these categories? Okay, what causes us to slip into those categories? Ego? Okay, what about our ego? How does it cause us to slip into that? Ah, yes, we think we're a little more. Okay, our ego gets in the way. Yeah, absolutely. What else? What else causes people to slip into these, do you think? Fear? Fear of what? What are we afraid of?
Rejection.
Ah, rejection. It's that fear of rejection. Being stupid? Okay. What else causes people? Experiences? Yeah. If other people treat us this way, we're more likely to treat them. We tend to reciprocate. So that gets back to, if you're doing that, you're more likely to get that. Even if people show up this way, you have a choice. As Michelle Obama would say, they go low, you go high. Okay? You get this. When I teach this to a lot of different groups, the comment is, I don't have time for that. Okay? Do any of you have any discretionary energy? Like, you know, at the end of the day, like if you leave work and you're like, whew, that was hard, I'm tired. Okay, but then you get home and your friends are like, hey, you want to go fly fishing? You want to go play pickleball? All of a sudden you're like, heck yeah. We all have discretionary energy in how we show up for our teams and for other people. Guess what? When we're showing up here and we feel ashamed, embarrassed, untolerated, disconnected, and alone, and we also are feeling WTF, not heard, somewhat fake, somewhat polite, do you think those team members are going to show up and give their best? No. If you spend a little extra time, look what you get instead. People feel honored, they're validated, they feel self-confident, fulfilled, valued, appreciated, seen. Do you think they're going to show up differently? Okay. Research has proven it takes 40 seconds to have a meaningful conversation. What's one of the most effective ways to have a meaningful conversation? Ask some questions. Absolutely. And that gets into, I said that the conversation today is about space and pace and grace. Pace is all about asking questions. It's about addressing every conversation with curiosity. So when something comes out of Jim's mouth and I'm like, OMG, I can't believe he said that. Do I get irritated or be like, Jim, tell me more?
Sure.
Okay. What makes this important to you? How did you come to believe that? What are your values around that? We have a choice in every conversation to lean into it in high regard. We have to get in the right mindset, and then we slow down the conversation by just asking some questions. The tricky part is, do we know how to ask good questions? So I was with a group I just do a lot of work with bankers, and so one of the group of bankers, someone comes to me, it's like, well, Nan, but I ask my bankers questions all the time. Why didn't this get done? Why did you do it that way? What? Okay, and I said, how do you feel when I ask you a why question? How do most of us feel when somebody asks us a why question? We become defensive. We've all learned you have to ask the question why 5 times in order to figure out the root cause of a problem. But when you're trying to build relationships with other people, when you're trying to work through a conversation where you openly have a different perspective, is that a good approach? No. The best 2 words to start every question with in my mind are what and how. I tell people that all the time. Get rid of those other questions. What and how questions. It's really easy, just those 2 words. If we can start our conversations and our questions with what and how, we're going to be much more effective. It's going to be more interesting. Does it take a little more time? Yeah. What do you get in return for that time? High regard. You get a little bit more quality. It's a very different conversation. And as they often say, no one's asking if no one's really listening. You know, I have a friend who makes over $1,000 an hour to sit home in her fuzzy slippers to listen. Because she listens at a really deep level. Most of us are listening to what? We're listening to words, but we're listening to what? To respond. Okay? We really need to listen to a deep level to hear what the other person is saying. Now, if we'd had more time, I'd make you practice it. You're all like, whoo, off the hook. So when I'm with my bankers, we do business speed dating where they have to practice listening. And listening means we have to repeat what they said. And then ideally, we're going to paraphrase what they said and then ask, did I get that right? Okay. Now, what is the value? And if they say yes, what should you do next? Ask another question. Okay. If they say no, then what did I miss? Now, what is the value? How is asking questions, how is that space, pace, and grace, how is asking questions maybe related to pace? Slows things down. Like if somebody says something and they push a hot button, you're like, ah, they kind of irritated you. By asking a question, you have a chance to let that emotion wash over you. Emotions are like clouds. They drift in, but they just keep moving. Okay? Do we get stuck on that? But if we ask a question, we have a chance to catch our breath. We have a chance to think about how do we respond versus react. And so it can be really effective to manage that conversation.